The day the package arrived, the sky over London was a dull bruise. I remember because the light in my flat turned that strange gray-yellow shade, like the sun had forgotten how to shine properly. Rain tapped lightly against the window, but the air inside felt dry, too dry. I hadn't spoken to Father Kareem in 6 months. Not a call, not an email, nothing. Just silence, the kind that grows between graves. When I saw the old parcel on my doorstep, wrapped in stiff brown paper and tied with fraying black string, something in my stomach twisted. No return address. No stamp. Just my name written in shaky, half-faded ink. Robert Thorne. I stared at it for a long time. I've dealt with haunted relics, cursed dolls, even a box once sealed with lamb's blood and prayers from 3 religions. But this felt different. Heavier. Like whatever was inside didn't want to be touched. Still, curiosity is a disease I've never managed to cure. So I brought it inside, sat at my kitchen table, and cut the string with a kitchen knife. That's when the smell hit me. Copper, mold, and something sweet like rotting fruit. Inside was a journal, leather-bound, worn at the corners, the way Kareem always kept his notes. But the pages were stiff with dried blood. Not splashed. Not smeared. Soaked. The first few pages were untouched, filled with his neat handwriting, tight, deliberate, like every word was fighting for space. But the deeper I flipped, the messier it got. Ink running off the lines. Sentences that didn't finish. Then came the symbols. Not letters, symbols. Some I recognized from old texts, others I didn't. Shapes that made my eyes ache just looking at them. Near the end, the ink turned red. I don't think it was ink. The final page had only one sentence, written as if his hand was shaking or being pulled away. When you hear the choir of silence, follow the ash. I stared at it, unsure why my pulse had started to race. It didn't make sense, but it sounded exactly like Kareem, cryptic, dramatic, and terrifyingly serious. I leaned back in my chair and rubbed my face. Rain tapped harder on the glass now, but I couldn't hear it. Not really. Kareem El-Azhar wasn't just my mentor. He saved my life, taught me how to see the world the way it really is. And if he sent this to me, it meant one thing. Something was coming, and I was already part of it. The next morning, I booked the first train to Covenridge. Where he disappeared. Where it all began. The drive into Covenridge felt like sliding into the pages of an old, cursed book. I crossed the final bridge just before dusk, where the sky gave up its color to thick, gray clouds. The trees lining the winding road were tall and bare, their twisted branches scraping at the last light like bony fingers. Fog crept along the edges of the pavement like it had been waiting for me. I hadn't been here before. Kareem never mentioned this place in detail, only hinted at it. A place where the silence lives in the soil. That's what he once said, half mocking, half serious. Back then, I thought it was just another one of his poetic warnings. But as I passed the crooked wooden sign reading Welcome to Covenridge, I felt it. A pressure. Like the land itself didn't want me here. The village was small, old, and worn thin by time. The houses leaned toward each other, like tired old men sharing secrets. Moss clung to rooftops. Shutters hung crooked. And the people, the few I saw outside, mostly elderly, paused in whatever they were doing to watch me pass. No smiles. No greetings. Just stares, cold and unreadable. I parked outside the Ashmore Inn, the only place offering rooms. The sign creaked above the door, and a single yellow bulb flickered in the fog. Inside, it smelled of damp wood and burnt coffee. A woman stood behind the front desk. Mid-50s. Stern face. Pale eyes that didn't blink enough. "You're not from here," she said without a hint of welcome. "No," I replied, setting down my bag. "I'm looking for someone. Father Kareem El-Azhar. He stayed here, didn't he?" The room went still. Even the bulb above us seemed to buzz louder, like it didn't like his name being spoken. Her eyes narrowed. "He left." "When?" "Months ago." "Did he say where he was going?" She shook her head slowly. "Only said he was going where the voices stop." I frowned. "The voices?" She didn't answer. Instead, she handed me a rusted room key with the number 3 carved into it by hand. "Upstairs. Last door on the left." The hallway creaked with every step. Faded wallpaper peeled back like old skin, and the air smelled faintly of burnt candles. When I unlocked the door, the hinges groaned, as if trying to warn me off. The room was small, just a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out onto the church steeple rising in the distance. St. Lawrence Cathedral. Even through the fog, its jagged silhouette loomed like a blade piercing the sky. I dropped my bag and sat on the edge of the bed. The The springs moaned beneath me. There was something odd about the silence here. It wasn't empty. It was full, like standing in a sealed room where someone had just screamed moments ago. The air was heavy, charged, like it held onto memories it didn't want to share. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out Kareem's journal. The dried blood on the cover had flaked off a little more during the drive. I turned to the page I couldn't stop thinking about. When you hear the choir of silence, follow the ash. What ash? What choir? I didn't understand. Not yet. That night, sleep came slow. The fog pressed against the window like a living thing. And somewhere in the inn, maybe above me, maybe below, I heard something move. Slow. Dragging. At one point, I swore I heard a voice. Low. Whispering just beneath hearing. Too soft to make out, but too real to ignore. I lay there in the dark, eyes wide open, clutching Kareem's journal to my chest, and wondered, what had he found here? And what had found him? The cold wind pushed against me as I stepped onto the cracked stone steps of St. Lawrence Cathedral. The building loomed above the town like a forgotten monument, its spires crooked from centuries of rain and neglect. Its stained glass windows were clouded with dust and grime, muting what little sunlight managed to creep through the heavy gray sky. My boots echoed against the worn floor as I pushed the wooden doors open. The air inside was thick, old, almost sour, like books rotting in a flooded cellar. Rows of empty pews stretched toward the altar, where faded candles sat in rusted holders. There were no prayers in this place anymore. Only silence. And something else. Something I couldn't name. You're not supposed to be here, came a voice, hoarse and trembling. I turned sharply. A thin man in tattered robes stood near the side chapel. He looked barely held together, wrinkled skin, sunken eyes, and lips that moved as if they were always on the verge of whispering secrets. This had to be Father Desmond. You knew Kareem, I said, stepping closer. I need to speak with you. He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes darting to the shadows behind me as if afraid they might listen. Finally, he motioned for me to follow. We walked slowly through a narrow hallway lined with statues of saints, their faces cracked and mouths broken. I could almost swear their eyes followed me. At the end of the hall, Desmond led me into a small office lit by a single oil lamp. He locked the door behind us. Kareem, he was warned, Desmond said, settling into an old wooden chair. But he didn't listen. None of them ever do. What happened to him? I asked. He didn't answer at first. Instead, he pulled out a rosary and gripped it tight. Kareem thought he could outsmart it. He found the old texts, the ones hidden beneath the altar. Ancient things written in blood and bile. Things even the church pretends don't exist. The Crimson Codex? I asked. Desmond flinched. Don't say its name. That book isn't scripture. It's a doorway. I leaned forward. Where is it? I don't know, he said, eyes suddenly watery. But I know where he went, before he vanished. I waited. He went below. Into the catacombs. Said he had to see the truth with his own eyes. I begged him not to. He went anyway. That was the last time I saw him. Silence settled over us like dust. Then, from the hallway, a faint sound. A whisper. Soft and steady. Too faint to make out the words. I turned my head. Did you hear that? I asked. Desmond's hand trembled. Yes, he whispered. It's been happening since he opened the passage. The walls, they speak sometimes. Especially at night. I stood, heart pounding. I need to go down there. Desmond grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. If you go, something will follow you back. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Because deep down, I already knew he was right. But I had come too far to turn back now. That night, I couldn't sleep. The inn creaked around me as wind pushed against the windows. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying Desmond's words in my head. The walls speak. At some point, the noise began again. Not from the wind. From underneath me. It was faint, like a hum made of whispers. I held my breath and sat up. The room was dark, but not empty. I heard something moving under the floorboards. It wasn't rats. And then a voice. So soft I could barely hear it. Robert! I froze. No one knew I was here. Except for the dead. And whatever waited beneath St. Lawrence. I didn't sleep much after finding the journal. The whispers hadn't stopped. They slithered through the silence, not loud enough to make out the words, but present, like cold fingers brushing the back of my neck when I turned off the lights. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Kareem's face, cracked and trembling, staring at something just beyond the veil of reason. Morning in Covenridge wasn't really morning. The sky stayed gray, and the fog hung low like a curse. I met Elena near the old cemetery behind St. Lawrence. She didn't say much, just handed me a flashlight and adjusted her leather satchel. "You sure you want to do this?" she asked. "No," I replied honestly. "But I have to." St. Lawrence was even more haunting in daylight. The stained glass windows had darkened over time, losing their colors. Gargoyles crouched on the roof, worn down by centuries of wind and whispers. The main doors groaned open, revealing cold stone walls and the overwhelming smell of damp incense. Elena led me down a narrow corridor behind the altar. The path twisted sharply and led to a spiral staircase. The stone steps were narrow, slippery, and dipped from where. We descended slowly, our footsteps echoing louder than they should have. Below, the cathedral's undercroft spread out like a forgotten tomb. Dust floated in the flashlight beams, and broken statues of saints lined the walls, many missing heads or arms. Some had their mouths carved shut. There, Elena pointed to a low archway sealed by rusted chains. A heavy lock held them in place. Kareem had written about this in his journal. The choir of silence waits beyond the sealed mouth. To open it is to breathe the absence of God. I took bolt cutters from my bag. As I snapped the chains, a deep sound filled the air, not quite a hum. It was the absence of sound. Everything went quiet. No wind, no creaks. Just nothing. "I hear it," I whispered. Elena looked confused. "Hear what?" "The silence." We stepped into the archway. The temperature dropped immediately. The corridor beyond was tight, more like a tunnel, carved crudely through the earth. Black candles had once lit the way. Their wax had pooled like blood on the floor. After a few feet, we came to a door. Old oak, bound in iron, with a sigil carved into its center. I traced it with my fingers, something inhuman, not from scripture. A spiral with 3 eyes. Behind the door, something moved. A whisper louder than the rest. Not from memory. Not from madness. It said my name. Robert. I stepped back, heart racing. "You heard that?" I asked Elena. "No. Just wind, maybe." But there was no wind. We pushed the door open. The chamber beyond was round, with a domed ceiling. The walls were covered in carvings, figures kneeling before wingless beings with hollow faces. In the center of the room stood a stone podium, and on it, a thick book. Its cover was dark red, dried, bound in something that made my stomach twist. Kareem's journal had called it the Crimson Codex. I approached slowly. The book seemed to breathe. The silence thickened around it, and then I heard it again. A choir. Voices singing in perfect harmony, but there were no words. Just tones, low, vibrating, endless. Elena stood still, eyes wide. "I can't move," she said, her voice shaking. "What is that sound?" I reached for the book. As soon as my fingers touched it, every candle in the room burst into flame. But there was no heat. The flames were blue, cold, and in the firelight we saw the writing on the walls. Not carvings, flesh. The walls were made of skin. Human skin, stretched and branded with prayers written backward. I wanted to scream, but the choir was growing louder, and the silence behind it swallowed everything else. Elena pulled me back. "We need to go," she whispered. "This place isn't just old. It's alive." I held the book tightly. Somehow, I knew I had to take it. Whatever Kareem had started, it wasn't over. And I was already too deep to turn back. As we left the chamber, the silence followed. It didn't echo. It listened. I couldn't sleep that night. Not because of the wind. It had stopped long ago. That was the problem. The entire town of Covenridge had fallen into a kind of eerie hush, like someone had pressed mute on the world. No dogs barked. No leaves rustled. The silence had weight, pressing against the windows, seeping through the cracks in the wooden floorboards beneath me. I lit a candle and stared at Kareem's journal again. Pages of it were torn, burned. One entry caught my eye, written in a frantic scrawl. "The vault lies beneath the choir. The saints do not rest. Their mouths are sewn shut, so they may not scream." I didn't understand it fully, but it chilled me. Whatever Kareem found, he believed it was beneath the cathedral, deep down, past where anyone was supposed to go. I met Elena outside the cathedral at dawn. She didn't speak much, just handed me a small flashlight and clutched her leather-bound notebook to her chest. "You're sure about this?" she asked, eyes scanning the church's tall silhouette. "No," I said honestly, "but I have to know what he found down there." We entered through a rusted side door Father Desmond had quietly left unlocked for me. I didn't see him that morning, only the echo of his coughing from somewhere deep in the nave. The cathedral felt even older from the inside. Damp stone, Faded saints in stained glass. Dust hanging in the air like smoke. As we stepped over broken tiles and creaked down the altar steps, I noticed something carved behind the pulpit. A circle, hidden behind decades of grime and soot. I brushed it clean with my sleeve. 7 tiny figures knelt around a chained symbol. Saints, I thought, but their eyes were hollowed out, their mouths stitched with lines of iron. Elena inhaled sharply. "This isn't Christian," she said softly. "This is something older. Twisted." I found a small iron ring embedded in the stone floor beneath the altar. With effort, I pulled. The slab groaned, then gave way, revealing a narrow passageway beneath the church. Cold air rose from it, carrying a sour, earthy smell. The scent of rot and something burnt. We descended slowly. My flashlight flickered. The stone walls were covered in black moss, and faint carvings ran along them. Wingless angels, burning skies, stars with too many points. "What is this place?" I whispered. Elena traced the carvings with her fingers. "A prison," she said. We reached the bottom. The hallway opened into a wide, circular chamber. At its center stood a massive iron door covered in hundreds of tiny symbols, some etched, some scorched, some painted in something that looked an awful lot like dried blood. The air was heavy. My lungs struggled to pull it in. The iron door pulsed. Not visibly, but spiritually. I could feel it beating, like a heart on the other side. Carved above the door in faded Latin. Porta sanctorum vacuorum. The door of the hollow saints. Kareem's words echoed in my mind. The saints do not rest. Their mouths are sewn shut, so they may not scream. I looked down. The stone floor around the door was cracked, scorched, as if something had burst through, and then stopped. Something had tried to escape. Or worse, someone had let it out. Elena opened her notebook, flipping through pages filled with drawings and notes. "This is the vault," she said. "The Crimson Codex mentions it briefly. It's a seal, an ancient lock, meant to contain fallen spirits too dangerous for the human realm." My flashlight flickered again, then died completely. We stood there in the dark, frozen. That's when I heard it. A breath, not mine. Slow and deep. Right behind me. I turned quickly, shining the emergency glow from my phone. Nothing. Just stone. Still, I felt something watching us. Not from the room, no. From inside the vault. "Elena," I whispered, "we need to leave. Now." She didn't argue. As we climbed back up the narrow staircase, I glanced one last time at the iron door. For a moment, just before we left, I thought I saw something press against the inside of the vault, a face, maybe. But it didn't look human. And its mouth, it was open. Wide. Waiting. We sealed the stone slab behind us. I placed a broken pew over it for good measure. Back in the morning light, I realized my hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from recognition. The breath I'd heard below. It was the same one I used to hear in my sister's room, the night before she died. That thing, Dural, was awake, and I was beginning to think Kareem hadn't gone missing. I think he opened the door and walked inside. I didn't sleep the night before. Something kept moving in the shadows of my room, just enough to catch the corner of my eye, but never long enough for me to turn and see it fully. The silence outside wasn't comforting either. It was the kind of silence that screams. By morning, Elena and I stood in front of the sealed stone archway in the deepest part of St. Lawrence catacombs. The damp air clung to my throat. Mold crept along the walls like veins, and every breath smelled like rot and iron. "This is where the last page leads," I said, tapping Kareem's journal. He mentioned the door of the unclean saints carved with nooses and nails. Elena ran her fingers over the ancient stones. "It's not just a door," she whispered. "It's an altar." She was right. Below the arch, etched into the ground, was a wide circle of symbols scorched into the stone, as if burned with molten metal. Bones, small ones, were pressed into the crevices. Some still had bits of rotted flesh. I crouched to examine the lock, a rusted iron clasp held shut with black wax. "Elena, this seal's not holy. It's pagan." Before she could reply, a gust of cold air burst through the hallway behind us. The candles we had lit flickered violently. I turned, heart racing, but no one was there. Then a voice, raspy, low, and wrong, crawled out of the dark. "Turn back, turn back, turn back." I shivered. The voice sounded like it was coming from the walls, or inside my head, or both. Elena stepped back, her face pale. "That wasn't your imagination." "No," I muttered, reaching into my coat for the small vial of holy oil Kareem had given me years ago. I poured a few drops on the seal. The wax hissed and smoked. The iron clasp cracked and split open like bone under pressure. With a deep groan, the stone arch slowly creaked inward. Beyond it was a narrow tunnel, no taller than 5 feet. Dust poured from the ceiling as we crouched and entered. Every few feet, old bones snapped under our steps, thousands of them, covering the floor like leaves in autumn. The tunnel opened into a round chamber. The walls were covered in faded paintings, wingless angels with hollow eyes and mouths sewn shut with golden thread. A large wooden altar stood in the center, its surface stained a deep black red. But it was the object sitting on the altar that made my breath stop. "The Crimson Codex," I whispered. It was real, bound in leather too aged to be earthly, with pages that shimmered faintly even in darkness. The book pulsed like it had a heartbeat. Strange letters flickered on the cover, sometimes readable, sometimes lost to shadow. "Elena, don't touch it," I said sharply as she stepped closer. She froze. "This isn't just ancient. It's alive." "But this shouldn't exist," she said, her voice trembling. "It's just a myth, a warning to frightened priests." I moved toward it slowly. My fingers shook as I reached out, not to grab it, but just to feel its presence. The moment I hovered over the codex, my ears filled with a deep, bone-shaking hum. I felt pressure in my chest, like something ancient was waking up. Then I saw something behind my eyes, clear as daylight. A woman hanging upside down in a church pew, her skin peeling off in slow, wet strips. A child with no eyes pointing at a well. Kareem's face staring at me, but his eyes were all black, and his mouth stretched far too wide. I stumbled back, gasping. Elena rushed to me. "What happened?" It showed me things. I wiped the sweat from my brow. Memories that aren't mine. Or maybe things that will be mine. She stared at the codex with terror now. And then we heard it. A dragging sound in the tunnel behind us. Something heavy. Something breathing. Elena grabbed a rusted cross from the wall. I raised my flashlight. The tunnel was empty. But the sound continued, closer now. Like wet fabric sliding across stone. "Elena," I said, barely able to whisper. "I think we woke something." She didn't speak. Because we both saw the ash begin to fall from the ceiling like slow snow. Just a few flakes at first. Then the silence again. Heavy. Smothering. I turned back to the codex. Its cover now read a single word. "Begin." I didn't open it. Not yet. But I knew I would. The old cassette player clicked as I pressed play. Dust puffed from the speakers like a dying breath. I was alone in the candlelit crypt beneath St. Lawrence. Just me, Kareem's tapes, and the kind of silence that felt alive. His voice came through, distorted but unmistakable. "This is Father Kareem El-Azza. Entry 12. November 18th. I sat on the cold stone floor, journal in hand, listening as the man I once admired tried to wrestle with something invisible. His tone started steady, familiar. He spoke of the codex again, its pages revealing patterns in dreams, as if it responded to thought. He described prayers that echoed back with different endings, and shadows that didn't belong to him. He paused. The static hissed for a moment. "Last night, I heard my name spoken through the walls. I thought it was just wind in the pipes. But the voice was mine, and it was laughing." A chill slid down my back. He continued, voice now shaky. "I have found the door. It was beneath the altar. Not a door in the way you'd expect. It's like reality bends there. Light pulls inward. Sound dies before it touches the threshold." I threw a pebble in. It never landed. Another long silence. When he spoke again, something had changed. I prayed. I fasted. I cried. But God, He doesn't answer here. Only it does. It listens. And it speaks in secrets. I leaned in, breath shallow. The demon, Dural, it doesn't scream. It whispers. It offers clarity. Not torment. Not chaos. It reveals. I understand now why the angels were afraid to fall. They feared knowledge, not punishment. I stopped the tape. My hand trembled. I knew where this was going. I pressed play again. His voice was colder, sharper. "I have stepped through, just for a moment, and I saw them, saints with their mouths sewn shut, kneeling in fire that didn't burn. And Dural, it didn't speak with words. It showed me my own soul, my regrets, my sins. It knew about Robert, about his sister. I froze. My name, on the tape. He carries guilt like a chain. He wants answers. Let him find me. Let him see the truth for himself." A crash startled me. One of the candles blew out. A gust of air, but no wind. I stared into the darkness. The tape kept playing. "But he won't stop it. He'll carry it forward. The vessel must be broken to be filled again. Then came something that didn't sound human. A laugh? A chant? I couldn't tell. It felt like dozens of voices speaking at once, layered over Kareem's. Then his voice returned, low, guttural. I am not Father Kareem anymore. He understood too late. I am the whisper in the silence. I am the ash that breathes. When Robert hears me again, he will know. He is already marked. The tape cut out with a violent snap. I stared at the recorder, heart hammering. Not just a warning. A prophecy. And I was already part of it. I woke up gasping. My breath caught in my throat like I had nearly drowned. The air in the room was thick, stale, and still. Outside, the wind had stopped. No birds. No creaking floors above me. Just an eerie, pressing silence. It wasn't peace, it was suffocation. I sat up, heart pounding, and that's when I saw it. My shirt was soaked in sweat, clinging to me like second skin. I peeled it off and froze. Right there, on the center of my chest, was a mark. A deep, red scar in the shape of a circle with jagged lines branching outward, like veins or cracks in shattered glass. I didn't remember how I got it. It wasn't there last night. I rushed to the mirror in the corner of the room, flicked on the weak lamp beside it. The mark pulsed faintly, almost glowing. I reached up and touched it. A shock of cold ran through my entire body. My vision flickered. Just for a moment, the reflection in the mirror wasn't mine. Its eyes were darker. Its mouth was smiling. I stepped back so fast I knocked over the lamp. It crashed to the floor, and the room plunged back into shadow. This was more than Kareem's madness. This was more than dreams or paranoia. Something had touched me in the night. Marked me. Claimed me. I tore through my bag and found Kareem's journal, flipping through it like a madman. I needed answers. Somewhere in here, he had to mention this mark. This scar. This brand. Page after page, his words unraveled. Once calm and methodical, they grew frantic, ink smudged, words scratched out, sentences unfinished. Then I found it. The vessel must be marked. The skin is the key. Through the flesh, the soul may be rewritten. I shut the book, heart racing. Vessel. That's what he called it. That's what I was becoming. Elena arrived 30 minutes later. She noticed the change in me the second she walked in. You look pale, she said, narrowing her eyes. Worse than yesterday. Did something happen? I didn't answer at first. Instead, I unbuttoned my shirt and showed her the mark. She stepped back. God, she whispered. It's real. You recognize it? She nodded slowly. It's in the codex. I grabbed my coat. Show me. We returned to the cathedral's underground archives. The codex was wrapped in black cloth, sealed in a glass case. Elena hesitated before opening it. Her hands were shaking. Are you sure you want to keep going, Robert? She asked. This isn't just research anymore. Whatever Kareem started, whatever this is, it's inside you now. I didn't look at her when I answered. It already was. Since my sister died. She unwrapped the codex. The pages hissed as we opened them, brittle and dark like old skin. Strange symbols crawled across the parchment, most unreadable, some shifting slightly as I stared at them. Elena flipped to a section marked with a crude drawing. A human figure. Arms raised. The same circular mark on its chest. Underneath, translated in the margin. The vessel of grief shall walk where saints have wept. When ash falls from silence, the gate shall open through him. My mouth went dry. Gate? I asked. Elena looked at me grimly. The vault. The thing Kareem was trying to open. I think it's inside you now. Or it needs you to finish what he started. The silence around us deepened. It wasn't just quiet. It was a vacuum. The kind that made your ears ring and your stomach twist. A silence that whispered. I turned to her. Then we don't let it finish. We find a way to stop it. Burn it. Seal it. I don't care what it takes. Elena didn't answer. She just stared at the mark on my chest, then at the codex. Robert, she finally said, what if this thing wants you to fight it? What if resistance is the ritual? I swallowed hard. Then I heard something. Faint. Far. A breath of a voice from the tunnel behind us. Come closer. Robert. I spun around. The stone corridor beyond the archives was empty. But I knew what I heard. And worse, I wanted to hear more. The mark on my chest burned. And deep inside I felt it. Not fear. Not panic. Curiosity. Like a door had opened just a crack. And something on the other side had started smiling. I didn't sleep that night. The storm outside had no thunder, only wind, howling, screaming through the trees like something alive. The windows of the inn trembled. Shadows stretched along the walls longer than they should have, flickering as if they were trying to reach me. My skin burned. The mark on my chest, twisted sharp, almost like a wound carved into my flesh, throbbed with a dull heat that pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. I knew what it meant. I was being claimed. The codex had said something about grief, about the vessel, and I couldn't stop thinking about Kareem's voice on that recording, how it had shifted from man to monster. He had made a choice somewhere down this path. Now it was offering me the same deal. But I hadn't come this far to be taken. I wrapped the codex in cloth and tucked it into my bag, then stepped out into the storm. Rain had begun falling sideways, slicing like needles across my face. The entire town of Covenridge seemed asleep, or hiding. Every light was off. Every door closed. The only thing guiding me was the flickering glow from the cathedral's tower. St. Lawrence, where it all began. When I stepped inside, the silence hit me like a wall. No echo, no wind, just a heavy, pressing stillness. It wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that came after a scream. I lit my flashlight and moved past the pews. The wood beneath my boots creaked louder than it should have. Down the stairs. Into the crypt. Into the cold. That's where I found him. Father Desmond stood hunched in the candlelight, sweat dripping from his brow, muttering to himself. The walls around him were covered in Latin symbols drawn in red, chalk, maybe, or blood. He turned slowly when I entered, eyes wide. "You shouldn't be here," he said. His voice shook. "He's awake now." "Kareem?" I asked. Desmond closed his eyes. What was Kareem is no longer Kareem. I stepped closer. "You knew. All this time." "I tried to stop him," he whispered. "We sealed the vault long ago, locked it with rites older than the church itself. But he found a way around it. Through the codex. Through you." "What do you mean through me?" I asked. He looked up at me. His eyes were full of guilt. "You were the contingency. The next key. His apprentice. His blood, in a way. When he couldn't open it fully, he made sure you would." I staggered back, the breath leaving my lungs. "No," I said. "I never." But something shifted in the air. A distant hum began to rise beneath us, deep and low like 1,000 monks humming in perfect unison. The stones vibrated. Dust drifted down from the ceiling. "The vault," Desmond said. "It's opening." I didn't wait. I ran deeper into the catacombs, down the path Kareem had once taken, following the whisper in the walls and the echo of my own guilt. And then I found it. A stone chamber lit by torches that shouldn't have been burning. The walls were covered in carvings, wings torn off angels, mouths sewn shut, saints with hollow eyes. In the center stood a massive circular seal, glowing with red light that pulsed like a heartbeat. And standing before it was Kareem. His back was to me, but I'd know that stance anywhere, tall, composed, hands clasped behind his back like he used to during sermons. "Kareem," I called. He turned. But it wasn't him. His face was pale, sunken. One eye had gone entirely black, the other glowed a faint gold. Veins crawled across his skin like cracks in old porcelain. And his voice. "You came," he said, smiling. "Good. What have you done?" I asked. "I brought truth into the light," he said. I looked into the choir, and it sang to me. Durrell showed me the hollow saints. The lies. The cage we built around the world to protect it from things we never understood. "You're being used," I told him. "That thing inside you, it's not wisdom. It's poison." He laughed softly. "You still think in terms of good and evil. You still think your sister's death was a mistake." I froze. "You remember the way she screamed?" he said, stepping forward. "I heard it. So did Durrell. That moment opened something in you. You've been walking toward this vault ever since." My hand reached for the codex in my bag. He stopped, sensing it. "You'll only delay the inevitable," he whispered. "You carry the mark now. Whether you want to or not, you are the door." The vault pulsed again. The seal cracked down the middle, red light spilling out like blood. Kareem raised his hands. The air began to twist, the stone underfoot rippled like water. I felt it in my bones, a presence older than time, stepping into the world. And then, everything went dark. Not because I passed out, because the light itself recoiled. I heard a voice behind my eyes. Not spoken, but embedded into my thoughts like rotten fruit. "Robert, let me in." The vault had opened, and I was no longer sure I was me anymore. I stood at the edge of the vault. The air was heavy with ash, thick like fog, but dry and choking. It smelled like burnt feathers and wet stone. The walls of the ancient chamber groaned as if they were alive, breathing slowly in and out. I could feel it in my bones. My heart pounded in my chest like it wanted out. Kareem stood across from me, or what was left of him. His robe was torn, soaked in something darker than blood. His face, half of it still looked like the mentor I once knew. The other half was something else. Burnt, cracked, twisted. A jagged line split his face, glowing red like fresh lava. His eyes were gone. In their place were deep holes filled with shifting black smoke. "Robert," he said, though his voice didn't sound human anymore. It echoed. It layered, like 1,000 voices speaking through him at once. I wanted to speak, but my throat locked up. My legs trembled, and I gripped the codex tighter against my chest. Its leather cover pulsed faintly, almost like a heartbeat. I felt the sigil carved into my own skin throbbing in sync with it. Kareem stepped forward, barefoot on the cold stone floor. "You were never just my student," he said. "You were my replacement. The moment I saw you, I knew the demon would choose you in the end." I shook my head, stepping back. "You lost yourself in this. You opened something you couldn't control." "I did control it," he snarled, and for a moment his human voice returned, sharp, bitter, desperate. "I spoke to Dural. It showed me the truth. The church lies. The world is dying. And only those who embrace the darkness will survive what's coming." A sudden gust of freezing wind burst from behind him, and the vault opened wider. No hinges. No door. Just stone folding into itself like a mouth opening. From within came a sound I can only describe as silence that screamed. It pierced my ears, and I dropped to my knees. I felt blood drip from my nose. Inside my head, I saw flashes, my sister Sarah, writhing in that hospital bed all those years ago, her eyes rolled back, her voice not her own. The memory hit me like a punch. Dural was inside me now, clawing at those old wounds. Kareem walked closer, arms open. "Let go, Robert. Accept it. We can fix everything. You and I together. Imagine what we could become." I stood. Slowly. My hands shook, but I opened the codex. Pages flipped on their own, stopping at one I hadn't seen before. Written in crimson ink, maybe blood, was a line that burned into my mind. "He who carries grief must speak it aloud to break the chain." I looked up at Kareem. "I still remember her voice," I whispered. "Sarah. The day she died. You weren't there, but I was. She screamed for help, and I couldn't save her." Kareem's smile faltered. "I let her die," I said louder this time. "That guilt fed Dural. But not anymore. You were right about one thing. He chooses the broken. But you were wrong about the rest. I don't want power. I want peace." Kareem shrieked. Not screamed, shrieked. His body jolted, twisted, bones cracking backward. His mouth opened unnaturally wide, and something black and massive began pouring from it. Smoke. Wings. Claws. It was Dural. I saw it take shape in the air, floating, formless, shifting between shadow and flesh. Its voice entered my skull like 1,000 nails. "You were always mine." I raised the codex. The wind roared. The chamber shook. The Latin words burned my tongue as I read from the page. My voice cracked, blood spilled from my lips, but I didn't stop. Dural shrieked and tried to pull itself back into Kareem, but I kept reading, louder, faster, screaming over the silence. With a final word, I tore the page from the book and pressed it against the scar on my chest. A flash of light. Blinding. The vault's mouth began to close. Kareem stumbled back, his body crumbling like dried leaves. He looked up at me one last time, tears in his blackened eyes. "I was only trying to protect you," he said weakly. And then he was gone. The vault sealed itself shut with a deep, thunderous boom. The wind stopped. The silence ended. I was alone again. The codex in my hands burned away into ash, page by page, leaving only dust. But the mark on my chest still pulsed. And deep in the stone beneath my feet, something whispered. It wasn't over. Not really. It never is. The floor beneath me cracked like old bones. The stone tiles of the cathedral pulsed, breathing like a living thing. A bitter wind howled through the broken stained glass above, carrying ash that didn't float but crawled, twisting midair, forming faces that screamed without sound. Kareem stood at the altar, or what used to be one. Now it was a jagged pedestal of bone and charred scripture, and he was no longer the man who taught me how to cast a protection circle. Half his face was Kareem. The other half, blackened, veined, and cracked, looked like something wearing him. His eyes were empty holes lit by a slow-burning red, and when he spoke, the voice layered like it came from 1,000 mouths buried in a well. "You made it, Robert. Just as I knew you would. The vault recognizes your blood." My hands trembled. The codex was in my coat pocket, wrapped in cloth soaked in holy oil. I could feel it throbbing, reacting to the air, to him, to me. I didn't come here to open anything, I said. I came to end this. Kareem laughed. Or maybe it was Dural. It echoed like thunder underwater. You think you still have a choice? You've already been marked. He's inside you now. Did you really think those visions were just trauma? I stepped forward, circling slowly, avoiding the dark cracks snaking across the floor. Maybe he is inside me, I said. But I'm not you, Kareem. A growl rumbled beneath us, like something waking from a long, angry sleep. The vault. It stood behind him now, a massive iron gate covered in scripture that had begun to bleed. The symbols twisted and peeled away as if melting. Kareem extended his hand. Join me, Robert. Together, we can control him. Rewrite the laws. No more hiding. No more victims. I looked at his hand, and I thought of my sister. Her eyes, wide and screaming, her body breaking as something ancient used her like a puppet. I was 14. I couldn't save her. But maybe I could stop this. I reached into my coat and pulled out the codex. The room darkened instantly, as if the book swallowed light. Kareem's smile twisted into hunger. Yes, he whispered. Give it to me. I opened the book. My hands burned, the ink bleeding into my skin. But I didn't hand it over. Instead, I began to read aloud. Not the words Kareem wanted. The opposite. Words I had found scrawled in the margins of his last journal entry. Words meant to trap, not release. Words written in Latin so old, even the codex recoiled. Kareem screamed. His body twitched violently. Black veins shot through his neck and arms. His skin bubbled, cracked, and steam hissed from his back as if something inside was trying to escape. You ungrateful thief, he bellowed. He lunged at me. I dodged just in time, barely avoiding his clawed hand. He moved like smoke and shadow, fast, unpredictable. He struck me once, across the chest, and I flew backward into a pew. The wind was knocked out of me. The codex fell from my hand, sliding across the stone. He leapt for it, but I was faster. With all the strength I had, I pulled the small flask of holy oil from around my neck and smashed it against the codex. Fire erupted instantly. Not natural fire, white, blinding, alive. The codex wailed. I didn't know a book could scream. Kareem shrieked in pain, falling to his knees. The vault behind him began to collapse in on itself. Screams and whispers poured from its cracks, 1,000 souls howling as the gate was sealed once more. Robert, he cried, and for a moment I saw his old self. Eyes wide. Scared. Human. I didn't mean for this. He whispered. I just wanted to know why they suffer. I walked to him, knelt beside him. I know, I said. But some doors are locked for a reason. He smiled faintly, then turned to ash in my hands. The cathedral shook. Flames licked the rafters. The stone groaned. I stumbled toward the exit as the entire place began to fall apart. Elena was there, bloodied, coughing, eyes wide. She had returned, against her better judgment. We ran. Together. Out into the cold night air as the church behind us collapsed into fire and silence. And from within the flames, I swear I heard something whisper. This is not the end. I returned to London with broken ribs, burned palms, and the weight of 1,000 shadows pressing against my chest. The rain hadn't stopped since I stepped off the train. It felt like the storm had followed me from Covenridge, as if it hadn't finished speaking yet. I hadn't slept much since that night, the night the cathedral bled ash and screamed like a wounded animal. I still wake up with my bedsheets wrapped tight around me, soaked in sweat, my scar burning like it's alive. I remember the way the stones of St. Lawrence glowed red as the vault cracked open. I remember Kareem's face, half human, half something else. His eyes were the worst part. They weren't eyes anymore. They were holes, doorways into a place without time, without God. And they looked straight through me, like they already knew what I would do. He kept whispering one thing, even as the exorcism burned through his flesh. You were always meant to finish this. I don't know if he meant it as a curse or a prophecy. I've sealed the Crimson Codex, wrapped it in blessed linen soaked in holy oil, tied it in rusted chains, and buried it inside a concrete box. The kind used for radioactive waste. Then I shipped it to a monastery in Iceland. One of the few places left that still understands the ancient tongues. They'll never open it. At least, I hope not. I didn't tell Elena where I sent it. I couldn't. She's strong, but knowing where it is would make her a target. We still talk, though. Sometimes we pretend we're just colleagues. But every time the line goes quiet, I know she's thinking the same thing I am. What if it wasn't over? Last night, I heard it again. The silence. It wasn't normal quiet, it was complete nothingness. No wind. No traffic. No ticking clock. Just the sound of something holding its breath behind the veil. Then came the hum. Faint. Like a distant choir trying to sing through water. It started low and rose. That's when I picked up the pen. I hadn't planned to write a journal. Kareem did. It didn't save him. But maybe, just maybe, if someone finds mine, they won't make the same mistakes. If you're reading this, I'm sorry. You're too close now. You're already listening. There's no way to unhear it once it begins. I don't know what's coming next. I only know this. If the silence ever starts to hum again, run, and never look back.